Thank you, lads. There must be an easy way of checking the time. Well, this is the noonday gun, and this will give you some clue to where we are this week. Yes? Guernsey in the Channel Islands. The noonday gun was fired from Castle Cornet, which was built over 700 years ago to guard St. Peter Port and its harbour. The attackers were the French, who occupied this castle twice during the 100 Years' War. Channel Islanders have remained loyal to Britain for almost 1,000 years. There was a slight hiccup during the Civil War when Jersey was royalist and Guernsey parliamentarian. But apart from the odd battle in the sports field, those days are forgotten. Although only a small island, Guernsey products still feature on world markets. The knitting industry has made a bit of a revival in recent times and goes back at least 400 years. Horticulture is going through a tough time at present, but thanks to the beauty, friendliness and stability of the islands, tourism is healthy and the finance industry is taking over as the top money earner. But for 5 years during World War II, the island's renowned stability came to an end. The bailiwick of Guernsey, which includes Alderney and Sark, was occupied by the Germans. The islands retain many ancient traditions and offices. The division into bailiwicks under the civil and legal leadership of a bailiff is just one of them. Before the occupation, all of Alderney's population and over half of Guernsey's was evacuated to the United Kingdom. The feelings of those in exile and the thoughts of all those who lived under the occupation are reflected in this hymn, which is just simply called National.
Lord, while for mankind we pray, of every clime and coast, oh, hear us for our native land, the land we love the most. Oh, guard our shores from every foe, with peace our borders bless, with prosperous times our cities crown, our fields with plenteousness. Unite us in the sacred love of knowledge, truth, and be, and let the hills and valleys shout the songs of liberty. Lord of the nations, thus to thee, our country we commend. Be thou her refuge and her trust, her everlasting friend.
To fully appreciate something as precious as liberty, you have to lose it for a while. And those Channel Islanders who lived under the occupation know what it's like to be denied basic freedom. Liberation 40 years ago was a double celebration. Freedom had been restored, and even more importantly, possible starvation averted. Food supplies, always difficult during the war, were almost cut off towards the end of the occupation. One man who was largely responsible for finding food during those terrifying years was Raymond Fowler, whom I spoke to in his home. Raymond, where did you find the food?
Well, the food was mainly found all over the occupied part of France. As you know, Harry, it was very evident that on 3/5 of an acre of land per capita that we could not feed ourselves. So we had to have a purchasing commission, which was a joint one with Jersey, and we established it at Granville in France. And of course I roamed for about the first 5 months of late 1940, and found quite a lot of food. Flour, wheat, butter, you name it, we found it.
How do you feed yourselves after D-Day? Because that was a tricky time, wasn't it?
Well, after D-Day, we had to live on our fat. We had precious little of it. But somehow or other, we fed on what we could produce from the land. People shared with each other.
What was the attitude of the Germans towards the islanders?
Rather patronizing, I think, at times. I must say this, that having had the experience of the treatment of the French by the Germans, I thought that they treated us more generously. They treated the British Channel Islands more generously.
What do you think that was?
They wanted to appear, I think, at least at the start when they first came, as great benefactors. And I remember one German saying, "We're not as bad as you English paint us."
What does freedom mean to you now?
Freedom, as far as I'm concerned, means to be able to go out and do your daily chores, meet your friends in peace and good humor.
All the things you couldn't do during the occupation.
We couldn't do it. We couldn't do it.
Thank you, Raymond. Well, let's hope those days never come again. That's the message of our next hymn, Come Thou Long-Expected Jesus, sung by the Guernsey Fellowship Choir. The Guernsey Fellowship Choir singing Come Thou Long-Expected Jesus in a unique location. Let me take you back there and have a closer look at the building, Little Chapel. It's a miniature replica of the shrine and basilica in Lourdes. Decorated with thousands of pieces of pottery, shells and pebbles, the Little Chapel is in the grounds of Les Vauberlais College, which was founded by French de La Salle brothers. It was over 60 years ago that Brother Diodar began building the Little Chapel. The main part of the work took him 2 decades. Now it's become one of the island's main tourist attractions. Some persons need long introductions. and you have to remind people of what they've done. Now, all I need from the next guest is 2 words. All I have to say is, odd ode, and you know I'm talking about the inimitable Cyril Fletcher. Cyril, you were the first comic ever to do a religious program back in the 60s, weren't you?
Yes, I was, Harry. I did a thing called Sunday Story on BBC, did it for 12, and then we did another 12 afterwards.
Now, with all your years of experience, how do you see the role of religious broadcasting?
Well, I think that it must be very helpful, but I can't ever seeing television doing for religion what television has done for snooker, for instance. But at the same time, it's a wonderful, wonderful thing, isn't it, for people who are restricted to their homes, elderly types and invalids and people like that. Then it must be a great comfort for them to see all the pageantry of it and to hear some of the fabulous music, to say nothing of the occasional sermon, which I don't often agree with. But yes, I think it is marvellous, and I'm sure that people get a lot of comfort from it.
Do you think it keeps people away from church?
No, I don't think so. I think it might even make them go to church. In the same way that you see a particular chap on telly and you go to the theatre to see him. They used to go to see radio people because they wanted to see what they looked like. But I think with some of the pageantry and some of the glorious singing in chaps like Secombe, for that matter, putting over the message, it's a very, very good way. It's a little crude to say that you sugar the pill, but at the same time you do make religion very acceptable.
Now, of course, this is a Sunday program, and there is a saying that goes, you're nearer God's heart in the garden than anywhere else on earth. Do you think that applies?
I think it does. Yes, I do. You see, one of the things I think which is paramount when you're living in the country and when you're a king gardener, the scene changes the whole time. Every spring you refresh yourself with the garden, and one gets to realize that there is a sort of design, and you are part of the design. I used to think that I owned a garden and that I owned plants, but I don't anymore think that. I'm just taking care of them.
Thank you, Cyril. It's nice to see you again after all these years. And now for some music, but no musicians, because the Guernsey Barbershop Quartet provide their own music. Here they are to sing Freedom Lord, which has been especially written for Highway by one of their members, Chris Claxton.
Freedom, Lord, freedom, Lord, what a gift of gift. Oh Lord, freedom, Lord, freedom, Lord, this is good news from Jesus. Men may rise and men may fall, but the glory of God will continue. He sent his Son to free mankind. May the love of the Lord be within you. Freedom, Lord, freedom, Lord, what a gift of gift. Oh Lord, freedom, Lord, freedom, Lord, this is good news from Jesus. Seek and you will surely find, for the door will bring wide right before you. You must have faith and trust in him. Be at peace so our Lord can adore you. Freedom, Lord, freedom, Lord, what a gift of gift. Oh Lord, freedom, Lord, freedom, Lord, this is the good news from Jesus. Fill your minds with the good things in life. Open your hearts to the Master. Tell the whole world you have heard the good news, and the freedom of God will spread forth down. Freedom, Lord, what a gift of gift. Oh Lord, freedom, Lord, freedom of God. This is good news from Jesus.
The Guernsey Barbershop Quartet producing some lovely sounds. But sadly, there are some less pleasant noises in the world. Yet those noises would sound like the sweetest music to thousands of people. People like Ron and Mary Norman. They may not possess the gift of hearing, but what they do possess is unbounded determination and courage. Both went deaf in childhood after meningitis. Ron is a self-taught grower who has learned to survive in a competitive business. He specializes in growing cuttings which are then exported. How did you meet?
We met as children at the Royal School for the Deaf in Manchester. And I was a prefect there, and Ron was a very small boy. So he didn't meet me, but I met him. He was known as the refugee because he came from the Channel Islands, and everyone thought he was a refugee. He was very disgusted at that. He was an evacuee. Anyway, we met again later through a hard of hearing club in Manchester. Ron came over for a holiday, and he said he only came for a holiday, but I really think he was looking for a wife. Well, looking for a wife. And that's how we met again. We married and I came here.
Tell us about your business.
I'm artist stock, nursery stock, and there were about 100,000 rooted cuttings here and about 100,000 plants. I found growing very suitable for a deaf person because it doesn't involve meeting too many of the public, you see.
How do you cope?
Pardon?
How do you cope?
Oh, far well. I very rarely have any problems. Most of the people I deal with in business know me very well, and they're very helpful without making a song and dance about it, you see. And that's the kind of thing we like. I rarely have problems.
Very good. What do you miss most?
Music. Music. It was the worst thing to cope with, missing music. But I learned so much in my 13 years as a hearing person that I can still remember the tunes, but I can't sing them. And I'm thinking to myself all the time, and sometimes think out loud if I think them on my own. But if anyone comes in, they don't know what I'm thinking. They always say, "What are you doing?"
How do the neighbors help?
Oh, they're marvelous people. They really are. We don't put on them. We try not to ask for help. We try to cope on our own. But if ever we need help, they're there right away. They'll phone for us. It's very difficult. In the snow, I couldn't get to work. So they will phone in and say, "I'm not coming, but I can walk all that way." Things like that.
Thank you, Ron and Mary, and continued success with their enterprise. Now, I'm going to take to the sea and visit 3 more islands without leaving the bailiwick of Guernsey, accompanied by the Sarnia Big Band and Feeling Free. Left down a bit, Sergeant. Now we're heading for the rocks. First stop is the smallest Channel Island, Herm. Just 10 families live and work here, but it's a thriving community with tourism and farming providing their income. The uncrowned king of Herm is Major Peter Wood, the island's tenant. The Wood family have lived here since 1949. And when Peter Wood and his wife Jenny arrived, what they took over was an overgrown, derelict island. Peter, Herm certainly isn't derelict now. How have you achieved this tremendous transformation?
When the war was over, it was not a case of just sitting back and letting things come to you, that we had to make a positive contribution to the rebuilding of things after the war in the way we saw it. And we saw a small community of people working together, not necessarily living in each other's pockets, but concerned with each other's, not only during the day when we were working, but also at the end of the day, available to each other as supportive. Were other people in trouble, people who worked for us, but other people, we would be there to help in the same way that we felt they would be there to help us. But we were certainly thinking of something constructive, that it was not going to be a time for saying, well, that's been a pretty tough 5 or 6 years, now we can sit back and do nothing. We felt that people like ourselves had to accept responsibility for what was going to happen after the war, as indeed I think we did during the war.
Visitors come here to get away from the daily grind. Do they get positive peace of body and mind when they come here?
Well, the thing that came through to Jenny and I the first day we came here was the aspect of peace that is here. Now, that's not a negative thing, in point of fact. Peace is a very positive thing. And I think that people who do come here for holidays, they find themselves in a small community of people. Although they may be holidaymakers and paying for it, in one of the various places on the island, but they also feel that they are making a positive contribution to the small community. They are part of it, even if only for a small time.
Do you think we really appreciate our freedom today?
It's a difficult one, that I think that people possibly expect too much, and that they aren't prepared to put into it as much or more than they want to take out of life. I find that one a little bit difficult, but I really think there's something in that. People are, in point of fact, wanting something for nothing.
Well, thank you very much for talking to us. You've been a very generous host. Well, our next stop is Sark, where none of the population of 600 pays income tax or is allowed to own a car. Its constitution is complicated. Basically, the island is mainly self-governing, but in many ways, Sark is still a feudal island, with a seigneur, a lord of the manor, its civil head. The governing body, the chief pries, which dates back to Norman times, meets in the island school. A short carriage drive away is the Church of St. Peter, where the choir sing Hilariter, a 17th century carol which celebrates the coming of spring and summer.
The whole wide world rejoices now, Hilarita, Hilarita. The birds do sing on every bough, Alleluia, Alleluia. Then shout beneath the racing skies, Hilarita, Hilarita. To him who rose that we might rise, Alleluia, Alleluia. And all you living things take praise, Hilarita, Hilarita. He guided you on all your ways, Alleluia, Alleluia. He Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, Hilarita, Hilarita. Our God Most High, our joy and boast. Alleluia, Alleluia.
Almost 20 miles north of Sark is Alderney, which many locals will tell you is the only true Channel island. It juts out into the English Channel, the busiest shipping route in the world. An island which attracts people who like the quiet of island life, including someone who needs no introduction other than the sound of his voice. He reads now a poem by Swinburne, himself an island lover. Its subject, a treacherous reef just west of Alderney, the Casquets. During the last century, a family lived on the reef. One of the daughters sought freedom in Alderney from the lonely life on the rocks.
And forth she fared as a stout-souled rover for a brief, blithe raid on the bounding brine, and light winds ferried her light bark over to the lone, soft island of fair-limbed Kine. But the league-long length of its wild green border and the small, bright streets of serene St. Anne perplexed her sense with a strange disorder at sight of the works of man. The world was here, and the world's confusion, and the dust of the wheels of revolving life. Pain, labour, change, and the fierce illusion of strife more vain than the sea's old strife. And her heart within her was vexed and dizzy, the sense of her soul as a wheel that whirled. She might not endure for a space that busy, loud coil of the troublous world. Too full, she said, was the world of trouble, too dense with noise of contentious things, and shows less bright than the blithe foam's bubble, as home she fared on the smooth wind's wings. For joy grows loftier in air more lonely, where only the sea's brood fain would be, where only the heart may receive in it only the love of the heart of the sea.
That was, of course, my very dear friend John Arlott, whose voice suggests the repose and timelessness of my final song, Sunrise, Sunset.
Sunrise, sunset, sunrise, sunset, swiftly flow the days. Seedlings turn overnight to sunflowers, blossoming even as we gaze. Sunrise, sunset, sunrise, sunset, swiftly fly the years, one season following another, laden with happiness and tears. Is this the little girl I carried? Is this the little boy at play? I don't remember growing older. When did they? When did she get to be a beauty? When did he grow to be so tall? Wasn't it yesterday when they were small? Sunrise, sunset, sunrise, sunset, swiftly flow the days. Seedlings turn overnight to sunflowers, blossoming even as we gaze. Sunrise, sunset, sunrise, sunset, swiftly fly the years, one season following another, laden with happiness and tears. One season following another, laden with happiness and tears.
Sadly, that ends our visit to the Channel Islands. I say sadly because it's ended all too soon, but we'll be back. So many of the people here have told me how during the war, neighbour helped neighbour, and how they shared what little they had with each other in those times of adversity. Surely we should do the same thing in times of peace as well. Next week, Highway goes to Middlesbrough. I'll see you then.